Welcome. I'm so excited and privileged to be the first speaker today and welcome you guys all to the Assembly 2025. I'm Ryan Schulz. I'm the Executive Director here at One North. I have hopefully a really interesting talk for you guys. I have a simple job. It's to get you guys warmed up and in the right mindset to absorb all the incredible information that our team has been working on. We have some incredible talks. We've been working tirelessly for the past 6 months on a lot of these talks. But as a way to get started, I want everybody to get in the right headspace to stand up. And I need you to turn around and face the ocean for a second. I want you to pay attention to the first ideas that spark into your head, the first words, the first things. And think about trips you've taken to the beach. Think about those moments where you walk down to the water and smell the salt air in the air, and hear the birds. Anyway, what are the first ideas or things that pop into your head? Great. Let's turn back around. Have a seat. Just shout out at me. What are some of the things that spark for you guys in that moment if you're looking out at the ocean? Limitless. Limitless.
Freedom.
Freedom. Breathing. Calmness.
Change.
Change. I like that. What you guys don't know that just happened, you guys just experienced something called the sublime. This is a kind of poetic term that emerged in prominence in like the 1700s around visual arts and poetry at the time. It is defined as being this overwhelming feeling of awe. It's kind of like wordlessness. I can't quite put into words what I just experienced, but it was something big and profound. So you grab at these words. All of those words are correct, but they are a shared experience that we all just had together, looking at something as awe-inspiring as the ocean. And that's why we brought you here, to kind of get you in that mind frame, to be able to open up to the potential and the possibility that the ocean can present. But the ocean isn't the only kind of natural place in the world that provides this idea of the sublime. The Grand Canyon is another great example, I think, of the sublime. Who's been to the Grand Canyon? You stand on the edge, you look out, and what do you think about? You think about time, right? You look at this river that's carved these pathways over the course of thousands and millions of years. And it's created this intricate pattern. And then you look at the immensity of it. You feel very, very small for a quick second. But there's other things that do this for us. The Northern Lights, if anyone's ever been able to see the Northern Lights in great detail, you're seeing kind of this electromagnetic experience that's happening. It's the Earth being tugged on by the sun. It's the solar rays kind of bouncing off the atmosphere. The Hubble Space Telescope also provides these glimpses of the gravitational pull of our universe, and it stuns us into silence. We can't even comprehend quite what we're seeing. But then the opposite of the ocean, I think, also does that. The desert, right? This expanse of death and sort of nothingness, but it also kind of captivates us and pushes us into this mindset of reverie. Now, some of you might have seen those last 3 slides. You might have maybe recognized them. Does anyone recognize them? No? Well, you should, because they're the Apple TV screensavers. And it's no, just a simple chance that Apple stumbled on these and started jamming into their devices. They've been doing this for years. Think about all the operating systems, if you're an Apple user, that you've had. It's High Sierra, it's Cascade, it's all these big, monumental features. They're attaching their brand to these ideas because they are overwhelming and awe-inspiring. And that's how they want you to feel when you're opening their device, when you pull out your phone, this effortlessness. It's just so seamless. I can't put into words how great this experience is. They're co-opting that brand experience in order to kind of build this bigger story that you are a part of. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the relationship with art. I mentioned that this idea of the sublime is very strongly connected to visual art. Visual art is something that's very important to me. It's very important to my family. Last year when I was on this stage, I talked about, not this stage, the other stage, I talked about improv. I was an improviser in high school and in college and shortly after college. And I talked about its role sort of in the creative process. After I left college, I did a short stint as a journalist. I worked in magazine publishing for a couple of years, realized that was not for me. And then I was an art dealer for 8 years with my wife. We traveled the world. We went to Art Basel, Miami Beach. We went to Frieze in London. We sold work to permanent collections and museums. We sold work to collectors. It was an incredible experience. It's where I think I learned my storytelling craft, because when you're talking about art, you're trying to connect with somebody about this interpersonal experience that they're having with this random piece of work on the wall. And I'm going to try to help you guys, if you aren't really an art person, engage in that same way, because the sublime is intricately connected to art experiences. And I think we have something we can learn about it when we're building experiences of ourselves. So this piece that's up here, does anyone know who the artist is? Can anyone identify it? He's a famous one. This is Monet. This is one of Monet's water lilies piece. This is in a permanent collection in a museum in Paris called the Musée de l'Orangerie. I am glad my wife is not here. She speaks French. My daughter speaks French. They make fun of me for my French pronunciation. I'm going to butcher it. The name of this painting is the Reflet d'Herbe. Did I say it right, Jen? I don't know. But these paintings, these massive paintings that we often see reproduced flat in books, are actually built into rotundas, these round gallery spaces built into the wall. And viewers are invited to step into the painting. It fills your field of vision peripherally, from side to side, from top to bottom. When Monet revealed this installation, he said, I wanted to create an art experience that was like a wave without horizon and without shore. This overwhelming experience that would take the viewer in and force them to confront something in themselves and connect with the work in a unique way. I could easily be talking about music up here. I'm an avid record collector. I love music. I love punk rock and post-rock. We can talk about that later if you're interested. But music does something I think very, very different. This is Fur Elise. Everyone knows Fur Elise. Da-na-na-na-na-na-na-na. Right? Everyone knows that tune. People can tinkle it out on the piano. It's very, very easy to recognize. But I think music does something different than visual art. Music provides an instruction manual. It's code for creating experiences and emotion. It's people playing instruments together against a piece of sheet music to get an audience to feel something, to feel joy, to feel sadness, to feel reverie. So it's a different kind of communal experience that's not as individualized. I think art does something unique. It's an individual experience, and often you find you go into a museum, you go into a gallery, it's quiet. They want you to keep your voices down, because interrupting somebody else's experience with that work is a violation of some unwritten rule that we have kind of built into these spaces. This is an incredible piece by Albert Berstadt. He's a German painter from the 1800s. He actually came to the United States, decided he wanted to be a painter, went back to Europe, trained, then came back to the United States again, quite a luxury, I think, at the time, and joined the Hudson River Valley School. And if you guys know that school of painting, it is large pastoral images of the American West and of America. It's telling this beautiful poetic story of what America might be. Those paintings are often very held responsible for the idea of manifest destiny and this pushing westward. And Berstadt would often travel to America's West. He would make, this is actually a small study of a painting. This isn't quite one of his grandest works. His grandest works and his biggest works that you've probably seen in museums, if you've been to permanent collections at the Art Institute or the Met, are huge paintings the size of that screen. He would travel west. He would go to the Rockies. He'd go to the deserts of New Mexico. He'd go to the coastline in Oregon, and he'd paint these incredible images. He was kind of the Thomas Kinkade of his time a little bit, but in a museum-y kind of way. He painted light. Everything was heavily embellished. And then he would bring back these studies. He would paint these enormous canvases, and then he'd promote the release of his painting and sell tickets in a theater.
He'd fill the theater for nights, weeks on end. He'd set the painting up on stage. He'd have big curtains in front of the painting. And then he'd come out in a tuxedo and he'd tell this story of traveling to the rugged American West and the things that he saw and how he got there and the troubles that he had. And then he would drop the curtain. The audience would gasp collectively at this image of a thing, of a place that they'd never experienced before. He would transport this idea of the sublime to this big audience, and they would have this collective moment like you guys just had with the ocean. And then he'd walk through the painting and talk about all of the details and tell interpersonal stories about what he experienced. Art has this power to transform not just you in a moment in a gallery, but you in a collective way with other folks, similar to music, but it's individualized. You're telling your own story in relationship to the canvas. There's another category of art that I want to talk about that is even more individualized and often harder to access for most folks. These are the paintings that when you are traveling and you go into a museum and you see them, you often overhear somebody say, I don't know what this is. My kid could do that. It's just paint smeared on canvas. How simple. What is this even? You might be able to identify a couple of the artists on this slide, at least maybe one of them. The first one, the Rothko, hopefully. That's a Mark Rothko on the far left. The middle one is Kazimir Malevich, and the one on the right is Barnett Newman. These artists all painted within the same century. Kazimir Malevich came a little bit before. Barnett Newman and Rothko actually were friends and have a unique relationship. Rothko's paintings are magical. If you guys have never had a real experience with Rothko, I'd encourage you next time you're at a museum to go find one and give it some time. Just stand in front of it. He does a lot of very complicated underpainting. It's not just paint on canvas. It's thin layers of paint that interact with the light. And when you stand there long enough and you really look at them, they kind of hum. They almost vibrate off the wall for a second. He was very focused on this idea of conveying, becoming a mirror. His canvas is becoming a mirror and conveying the idea that the viewer brought to the canvas. He wanted to paint the basic emotions of human life: pain, tragedy, loss, sorrow, joy, those same things that sort of everyone brings to the museum in their daily lives. There's a chapel down in Houston, the Rothko Chapel. Barnett Newman actually has a sculpture out in front of it. It's a broken obelisk piece. But the chapel was designed, it's a non-denominational church. There's several paintings inside. You have to buy a ticket to go inside. There's usually a long line, and so you're only allowed a certain amount of time. There's no talking allowed inside. And people often break down in tears inside of this space. It happens in museums all the time. It happened in Rothko's time in galleries where they were selling these paintings. He was confronted with it, and he said, well, that's what I want people to tap into. I want them to tap into their internal emotion and kind of bring what they have to the painting. I don't want to tell them a story. Malevich came before Rothko. Rothko was painting in the middle part of this last century. Malevich was in Russia. He's part of the supremacist movement. And at that time in Russia, if you know anything about history, Russia was kind of a wild place. Lots of governmental turmoil, lots of religious oppression, lots of government control. And the supremacists sort of wanted to push back against that with paintings. And so they were trying to destroy the iconography of the time. Malevich's most famous piece is a piece he just calls God. It's a black square canvas. He hangs it in the corner of a room. Whenever it's shown, it's hung in the corner of the room, like literally at an angle, which is often where religious images would be hung in a home. He was challenging this idea of what creation actually is. And his idea was this non-objective style of painting. In the world of, this is a little cocktail hour talk for you. In the world of modernist painting, there's a handful of camps. There's abstract art and there's non-objective art. There's a bunch of other ones too. Abstract art is taking an object you can recognize and then abstracting it, right? So think of Picasso, almost anything he's done. There's a woman, it's a horse, it's someone playing guitar. The Impressionists taking flowers and fields and turning them, just twisting them a little bit so that they become something unique. Non-objective painting is trying to create something that's never been seen before. Non-objective painting is taking shapes and colors, breaking them down into their core elements and trying to make them as fresh and new as possible. And that's what Malevich was trying to do. He was trying to provide this truly creative act, playing God in essence. When people would say, oh, I see a cityscape, or I see a neighborhood, or I see some sort of landscape architecture in your piece, he'd often destroy the canvas or never show it again. He was a very picky sort of dude. Barnett Newman on the right, fascinating individual. He actually ran for mayor in 1933 of New York City. He wrote a bunch of books. He had this idea that people who could engage with modern art that were breaking the rules were the most evolved intellectual species on the planet. If you could engage with contemporary art and not laugh it off, you were elevated. And that's a pretty high bar. It's fairly highfalutin. And I realize I'm kind of he's jamming that down your throat. But his paintings were playful. He called these zip paintings. He typically zipped them out very, very quickly. He didn't spend a ton of time, not nearly as much time as Rothko spent building those canvases or Malevich spent planning out those works. So this is some of the challenging kind of painting that exists potentially in a museum, but we're going to jump more to present day. We're going to talk about another one of my favorites. This is Michael Heiser. This looks like a non-sculpture. Am I correct? And that's sort of the idea of it. Michael Heiser is an incredible earth artist. It's another category of art. If you've been to LACMA, anyone here from LA? If you've been to LACMA, the giant boulder that sits above the entrance, you walk below it. It's this huge boulder that he transported from the Nevada desert, and it sits precariously above this depressed walkway as you walk into the museum. It's terrifying to walk underneath. That is the kind of thing that Michael Heiser likes to do. This is a piece called North, South, East, West. Each of the different depressions in the gallery floor, those are cut out of this gallery space. This piece is in Dia Beacon in upstate New York. If you've never been to Dia Beacon, please go. Do yourself a favor. If you're on the East Coast, it is totally worth your time. One of my artists that I represented actually knew the curator here, and so I got to go beyond the little glass wall that you see in the bottom corner and go inside this piece. Not down into it, but I got to approach it and walk next to it. And something kind of incredible happens when you're walking past this piece, and you can sit back and watch it happen to other people as they walk through the gallery. There's kind of a gravitational pull, and it's not just curiosity like, I'm going to go look at this piece. It is you feel your gaze and energy kind of being pulled into these pits. You can't see the bottom of them. The first one is a cube, the second one's a cone, the third one is a pyramid, the last one is a cylinder. You can't see the bottom. Even when you peer down into it, you can't see the bottom. You feel the hair on the back of your neck kind of stand up when you get very close to them. It's an intense piece, but it's not his most ambitious piece. I think this is probably his most ambitious piece, and this might be one of the most ambitious pieces of contemporary art on the planet, besides maybe James Turrell's Sky Space, which is another thing you should Google later on. It's also in the Nevada desert. I mentioned that Heiser is an earth artist, so he likes to take the materials of the space and use them in his work. This piece was started in 1972, and it was completed in 2022. If you're doing quick math, that's 50 years. It cost $40 million to create. It's a non-objective city. It's called City. I say it's a non-objective city, even though it has a name that's an equivalent to something in the real world, but it's not abstract. This is a lunar landscape. This exists on some other planet. When you approach and enter the space, you're sort of forced to reckon with time. You're forced to reckon with yourself. It is an equally overwhelming experience to standing in front of a Mark Rothko, but it is experiential. It takes a while to walk through. And as you walk down the gravel paths, you're presented with these different views and vistas, and you are completely taken out of reality for a moment or two while you're there. Really incredible piece. I mentioned that the sublime sort of came into prominence in the mid-1700s. This is a piece by Giuseppe Sammartino called The Veiled Christ from mid-1750. It's a really, really intricately carved, solid marble piece. It's the reclined, recently died Christ laid onto a marble pad. These pillows below him, these incredibly realistic pillows that look soft, but they're carved out of marble. And then this delicate shroud laid over the body. When the piece was revealed, it was often said that he had to have done it through alchemy. There had to be some magic trick, maybe even witchcraft. It became incredibly controversial at the time, but also it was a spectacle, and people would come from all over to marvel at it. It inspired a whole bunch of veiled art. So there's busts and all sorts of other kinds of sculptures you can find online that do the same technique, but nothing quite captures this. This is the definition of the sublime. I don't even know how quite to describe it, even though I just described it for a couple minutes to you. But I want to show you some other sculpture that's very different from this, that's going to attempt to do the same thing. These are two pieces by Anish Kapoor. Who has been to Chicago and been in Millennium Park? What is the name of the big famous sculpture that is in Millennium Park? The Bean. It is not actually called The Bean. The actual title of that piece is Cloudgate. Now, when you stand in front of Cloudgate, what do you see? You see yourself, but not just yourself. You see yourself, you see the people next to you, you see the people that didn't come with you, you see the city behind you, you see the sky, you see the ground underneath the piece. It's this funhouse mirror. It's bent and warped. It's showing you everything. It's showing you all of what's around you. Anish Kapoor is famous for saying, artists that have too much to say often leave no room for the viewer. I want people to come and bring an open mind and present themselves to the work and have an interaction with the work and see what happens on the other side of it. That is what's happening. It's the same thing with Rothko. You're looking into a mirror when you're looking into an Anish Kapoor piece. Now, these are more challenging pieces of Anish Kapoor's, but I find them incredibly interesting and rewarding. So that piece on the left is called Svayam. It's a Sanskrit word. It means to auto-create or to self-make. It's a giant chunk of pigmented wax that's sitting on a track that moves through several rooms in a gallery and forms itself as it's shoving itself through the doorways. This is at the Royal Academy of Art in London. It's an incredibly interesting piece. It moves super, super slowly. It forces you to be patient if you want the reveal of being able to see it. But it makes you immediately think of yourself. You can't go through that doorway. There's a separate doorway that they've cut and made for you to get around it. How are we shaped by our environments when we walk through those spaces? How does time change us as we move through the world? You're confronted with all of these ideas. And again, that's not the idea of the piece, but it's how we react to it. It's how a lot of people react to it. It creates this experience that is unique to the piece. The piece on the right is called My Red Homeland. Now, both these pieces use red pigmented wax, but the piece on the right, he actually made this machine that does the sculpture for him. So he doesn't actually make the sculpture. The sculpture is also self-made. So he piles the wax, he turns on the machine, it carves this intricately perfect circle, and then you stand and watch this thing spin, and you think about the world spinning. You think about the hands on a clock. You think about time. You think about how long you've been there. You think about how long you want to stay there. Your mind is wandering. Again, you're having this emotional kind of reaction, this intellectual reaction to something that on its surface is a pile of garbage. It's a lump of clay. It's an unsculpted, unmade thing. Now, I have a video of Svayam that I want to show you guys, the one on the left, and I want you guys to just watch what this looks like as it's moving. Okay, so this obviously isn't Svayam. Why am I showing this to you? This is a dumb video I found on the internet. Some guy that made this thing that spreads the butter for him. I'm showing you this for two reasons. One, the last handful of slides were heavy. I realized that. That was intense, right? But the next two slides are also pretty intense. So I really wanted you guys to just have a laugh as we get to the next couple of slides. There's things outside of the art world that also present the sublime. There's things that humans make collectively. We don't even know we're doing it, but it creates the experience. Here's three photos. On the far left, we have the March on Washington, where Martin Luther King gave his I Have a Dream speech. On the top, we have the Arab Spring. On the bottom, we have St. Peter's Square. I didn't know the Pope was going to die when I started this. This is actually John Paul's passing from years ago. And I think the interesting thing about all of these to me is the idea of all these people convening in one place around a singular idea and just sort of accepting the reality of it, celebrating the reality of it, mourning the reality of it. You guys know how hard it is to get a large group of people from your organization to do anything in concert with one another, right? Trying to get people to do, you can't even get 3 friends to agree on where to go to dinner, right? These people all just spontaneously decided we have to be in this place. That scene in St. Peter's Square just happened again a week ago. It happens every single time the Pope dies, spontaneously. People that want to believe, people that want to tap into this idea, people that want to connect with that experience, show up and experience it together. Trigger warning on this next slide. There's a couple of upsetting images on there, but I think these are all also examples of the sublime. The Titanic. We make movies about this incredible tragedy. We make songs about it. We write poems about it. We make jokes about it. This was something that shaped the news of the day. It was a horrific tragedy. We now send people in submarines to go explore this wreckage on the bottom of the ocean to satisfy some curiosity. We're drawn to it like that Heiser sculpture. We're drawn to it like the ocean. The march in Tiananmen Square. I remember seeing this image when I was a young kid. I remember watching it on the news, this businessman with his briefcase stepping in front of this line of tanks that the Chinese government had deployed on Tiananmen Square to break up the protesters. And then the tanks start to move one direction, and he steps in front of the tank as it moves to the left and stops it again. An incredibly powerful, big image. And then lastly, the World Trade Center. I was just watching a comedy from the 90s the other day, and there were the Twin Towers in the background. Completely took me out of the movie and shoved me back into my car as I was driving through that intersection when I heard that the first plane hit the North Tower. This was a global tragedy that we all are experiencing right now in this moment. You can feel it. You know the experience. I know people who lost people in that tragedy. It's an intense thing. That is also the sublime. All right. We're through the tough part. We're back to the ocean. There's this great quote by Rick Rubin. That's a hard turn. There's this great quote by Rick Rubin. He says, "There's a reason we're drawn to gazing at the ocean. It's said that the ocean provides a reflection of who we are closer than any mirror." I like this quote. I think that it is said part in the second sentence is doing a lot of work there. He's just a long line of philosophers that have always said this. He said this first. I rewrote the quote to kind of be a little bit more finely tuned to what I'm talking about. The ocean is an empty vessel that is capable of holding dreams of almost any size or shape. And that's what it is. It is a dream machine. I think it's always been a dream machine. You stand there, you go down. Who's been down to the rocks? It's impossible to ignore your surroundings. It's almost impossible to think about anything else. It eliminates half the world's inputs. Everything from life is behind. Everything that is not is out in front. All of your family and friends and cars and toys and things that you have are there. Everything else is out there, but it's also nothing. It's this endless sea that connects the world. It's why we're named the Blue Planet. It is the big idea of civilization, of what it gives us life. It is sort of everything. You stand there, you look at the tides, you watch the tides go in and out. But the tides are interesting because that's not actually what's happening when you watch the tides go in and out. There's a great story by Neil deGrasse Tyson where he explains what's actually happening. The tides are being pulled, I think we all know this, by the sun and the moon. But what does that actually mean? Well, the bulges are static, connected to those large gravitational fields. The Earth is rotating in and out of the tides. When you watch the tides go in, you're actually seeing the cosmic dance of our Earth turning and then traveling around the sun in combination with the moon. Now, when you hear this, you can't unsee it. You can't unknow it. It's the invisible hand creating this experience. You've seen the magic trick. That's Oz, right? Behind the curtain. But primitive people didn't understand any of this, right? That knowledge came way later as we had knowledge of the universe and knowledge of the larger world beyond our shores. This is a super early map. It's called the Bettolina map. It's in the Italian Alps on the northern edge of Italy. It is the map of the known world at the time, where all of the civilizations and settlements are. There's no ocean on this, because traveling on the ocean was stupid. You would throw fishing nets into the ocean, but no one could reliably travel on the ocean. It was certain death out there, and there were monsters. So this is the first map of kind of the villages and the towns, and it allowed you to make your way around. But soon we got good at going out on the ocean and starting to make our way around the world. This is another map, a Babylonian map, called the Imago Mundi. That ring sort of around the map in the middle is the Bitter River, the ocean. This was a map for merchants and travelers to be able to make their way to towns and start to get bolder. It built confidence about travel. It built this ability for us to start to tell stories about the things that we saw. And then those stories would be collected in libraries and in learned people's houses. And they would be shared, and they'd be turned into other artifacts. This is a map by Eratosthenes. Eratosthenes was a Greek polymath. He was the head librarian at the Library of Alexandria, but he was also a poet and a writer. He did everything, a physicist. And he would scour the archives of the Alexandria Library for stories to try and recreate the world. He made this map out of a whole bunch of stories that other people had told about their journeys and voyages. Another fun fact about Eratosthenes, he was actually the first person to predict that the Earth was round. And he actually was able to accurately measure the circumference of the Earth by doing a very, very simple experiment. When he was going through the library, he came across an account of a woman who went to a well in her town on the summer solstice, looked down into the well, it was noon, and the sun was directly overhead. It was perfectly framed in the bottom of the well. She could see the reflection of it. And she thought it was interesting enough to tell this story, and someone wrote it down and put it in a book, and someone put that book in the library, and Eratosthenes stumbled across it. Now, a normal person would probably read that and be like, that's kind of weird. What a coincidence. Eratosthenes decided he would do a little experiment. So on the next summer solstice, a year later, he went to his town, well, and looked down into the well. No sun. Because the story that had been told in this book was 1,000 miles away. Now, he could have said, that was the story of a mad person. She made that up. But he waited another year and ran another experiment. He put a stick next to the well in the town where the woman looked and saw the sun. He put another stick next to the well in his town. He had people report what they saw. In the town where the woman saw the sun, and the sun was there on the solstice for that observer also, there was no shadow at the base of the stick. But in his town, there was a shadow. He measured the shadow, and he was able to deduce the size of the stick, do some basic geometry, and figure out the angle that must have been created by this single light source that's hitting the Earth. And he quickly was able to deduce the circumference of the Earth and prove that the Earth was round without ever having traveled outside of his region. Pretty remarkable stuff. But this is how we build understanding of the world. That is technology, what just happened there, that experience. And it leads to advances in map making. This is one of the first and most complete globes of its time. It was created in 1492. What else happened in 1492? What is not on this map? North and South America are not on this map. So Columbus came back in 1493 and said, hey guys, we have a problem. We have to change all the maps. I found something. And so we did. This thing went into a museum. It still exists in a museum in Germany. You can go see it. But this is, again, another collected story that has been built by many stories being put into a single piece of communication. This is actually the most complete map ever printed in Chinese, the earliest version of the most complete map ever translated into Chinese. It was created by Giulio Alani. He was a Jesuit missionary. It's from the mid-1600s, early 1600s. And this kind of has all the stuff on it, right? This opened up Chinese commerce. This opened up the ability for the Silk Road to take effect. But this was not built overnight. This was built by all of these people who came before it. This, again, is technology. And it took other kinds of technology to make this happen. It took these things, these super simple, nearly household items, to be able to give people the confidence and the ability to travel long distances over the ocean. So we have a lead line to be able to know how deep the water is that you're in and make sure you're not going to hit some reef. You have a traverse board, which allows you to chart via the stars where you are and then do a time calculation with a time-making device and then be able to kind of figure out where you were going. And you can kind of keep track. We have an astrolabe that allows you to track the horizon and then where the location of the stars are. And then as you move through the ocean, and then you have a cross staff. These are simple, basic things trying to accomplish very simple, straightforward jobs. Where am I? Where am I going? How long have I been going? What's the distance between where I am and something else? And then very quickly, new technology came along, right? Better technology. We have a compass, we have a sextant, we have a chronometer, which is basically just a clock that doesn't lose time when you're on a boat, because historical clocks would lose time because of the rocking of the boat. These things, suddenly, in combination with those other maps, those other pieces of technology, allowed us to travel the oceans and explore and go build businesses, build entire industries out of clean air. Technology has advanced. This is probably the most impactful piece of technology, I would argue, that has happened for the human race. It has unlocked entire industries. It's how you all got here today. It's how you get to the grocery store these days. It's how you communicate. And we take it all for granted. We don't know how this works. No one in this room knows how this works. If you do, let's talk later. But it is a profound, monumental piece. So what's my point here? My point here is that technology comes, disrupts, changes the landscape over and over and over, but we do it to ourselves. Last year, I showed you guys, for those that were here, I showed a commercial. I think Super Bowl commercials are an incredible way to kind of get a sense of the zeitgeist of people. What are people caring about? What's most important to them? There was a commercial in this year's Super Bowl, I don't know if you guys saw it, that also did the same thing. Specifically around AI. There it is, the first mention of AI. Not the last time. We will talk about it today. I'm going to play this through for you, and then I want to talk a little bit about what I observe in it.
I'm trying to tell you, you don't want to believe it. AI is coming for everybody, and it's going to take over everything. Miss Erica, will you please tell this clown pretty soon we won't even have credit card machines. It'll all just be AI.
Bro, you're overreacting.
I don't know. What do you think, babe? You think AI is going to take over?
What you think? I'm telling you.
You really think computer is gonna take over everything?
That's gonna be touchscreen, all type of computer, all this probably not even
all
gonna be
this.
made.
You know what, Mr. James? Today it's on me.
For real?
No job. Have a wonderful one.
I've been trying to tell this cat that pretty soon computers taking over everything. When you start drinking Tab?
That young man has taste.
Yeah.
And about these computers, we're gonna be all right.
Yeah, man.
You're gonna be alright. Don't worry about it.
I think we're going to be all right.
So what's happening here? These kids are coming in talking about how technology is going to fundamentally change the business. It's going to be a totally different experience in 20 years' time or 30 years' time. And it's not. The fundamentals are the same. The customer service, the attention to detail, understanding your users, all that stuff is happening in this commercial. There's that moment, I love it, when the old guy is having a hard time writing the check and he just gives them a freebie. He's recognizing the taste changes of the younger folks and how he's moved up to Tab as this new thing. He's acknowledging it. He's building relationships. Those are the things that matter. Now, I'm not standing up here saying AI is no big deal. AI is a huge deal. But these are the things that ultimately actually matter, right? Knowing your users, defining the brand, measuring your work, being unique, telling a compelling story, innovation. These are the core things that we all try to search for and do in our day-to-day lives. It doesn't matter if you're in design or technology or marketing. These are the things that are most important to business. AI is just another technology that's going to come and amplify these things or change them a little bit or augment them. When you do all of these things together, you're designing something. You're making an experience. You're creating a product. You're creating something that people can consume. When you do this really well, and you do it in concert with your leadership and across your entire organization, you get something called good design. I did not make this up. And it's not just because there's a stamp on there. This is actually something that McKinsey and Company quantified in a study in 2018. They looked at 300 different businesses across 5 years, and they looked at their design practices, and they interviewed leadership, and they talked about leadership goals. They talked to customers. They looked at financial reporting. And what they found was that over a 5-year span, folks that invested in design in a coordinated way across their organization, connected to leadership, outperformed their benchmark competitors by 2 to 1 when it came to revenue. And it wasn't just revenue, it was also returned to shareholders, so the money that they paid out to folks. It's a pretty big competitive advantage. It takes 5 years to get there, but there's a couple of other things that I see in these slides. Think about when this is happening. So 2012 to 2017, this is kind of the height of design thinking. This is the height of better design practices. Just before this, Apple's releasing really well-designed, really smart, innovative products that are changing our consumption behaviors, right? It's elevating what we expect out of products. It's elevating what we expect out of services. And so everyone was kind of starting to ride this wave. So the effects are cumulative. There's this moment here in 2013 where the benchmarks are outperforming the folks that are investing in design because it costs more money. They have less money to return back to shareholders. But what happens over the long haul? You build loyalty. You build a reputation. You become known for having that thing that is more thoughtful, that is more connected, that is more predictive of how people want to use it. So we come back to these core principles. Know your users, define the brand, measure your work, be unique, tell a compelling story, innovate. These are basic ideas. Users, brand, data, disruption, storytelling, innovation. When you do this in a coordinated way across your organization, when you're communicating and collaborating, it becomes something else. Design is not about decorating and showing off. Design is about meeting users where they're at, exceeding their expectations, and holding their attention to amplify the investments that you made already and all of your colleagues made to get you in the position that you're in today. It's standing on the shoulders of giants. This is building collective maps. This is the accumulation of knowledge and energy and focus against a business process. McKinsey actually broke down kind of what the things that they were looking at, what the actual difference makers were. And this is what they found. First, analytical leadership. Measure and drive design performance with the same rigor as revenues and costs. So aligning your design practices with what the business wants from a financial perspective and making sure that everyone's on the same page. Second, cross-functional talent. We talk a lot about multidisciplinary at One North, bringing different departments together, bringing different viewpoints together, making user-centric design everyone's responsibility, not a siloed function. Third, continuous iteration, being able to say goodbye to things that don't work, being able to not necessarily lay blame at the feet of somebody that had a failed project. This is about pushing forward and knowing that the next thing, if you're doing all these other pieces in the right way, you will end up in the place where your users want you to be. Last, user experience. It's the only thing that matters, right? But it's not just user experience. I would argue that all experiences matter. Employee experience, customer experience, patient experience. Increasingly, it's going to be agent experience in the AI space. Experiences are the only thing that matters. It doesn't matter if AI comes and upends all of our businesses. The only thing that matters is creating a tangible experience that people can connect with, that people can rely on, that people will tell stories about. So, last time, third time, back to the ocean. We brought you to the ocean to hopefully tap into a moment of quiet so that you can absorb everything you're about to experience today. We have some incredible speakers lined up and a ton of insights coming your way. The thing I want you guys to keep in mind as you move through the next day, day and a half, I want you to have this question on the back of your mind all day. I want you to ask yourself where you want to go. Thank you very much.